The mare stopped abruptly. There was a corpse in the street, and the sound of steel crossing steel. He tugged at her reins, turned along an alley that ran across the back of the shops, and emerged on the next broad, empty street, with tall houses tiled in red, rising high enough to block the sun. He looked right and left, but the street was empty. From long practice, his eyes rose, looking at rooflines and balconies above him, but nothing moved, and he gave the horse her head. They flew along the street, past the corner of Violence, and down to the riverside, where he reined in and turned the mare into Steel Street, where the armourers were. He knew the shop well. Arnson and Egg, the two families on the gold-lettered sign, had made fine guns since the principle had first been developed far to the east. He had a moment of doubt. The street seemed deserted. But he saw a light burning and smoke from the chimney, so he dismounted, tethered his horse to a hitching post, and moved his dagger back along his belt, from habit. Then he pounded at the door, despite the darkening eve and the sounds of violence in the high town. He heard footsteps. "You came," said young Arnson. He pushed in beside the young man. "I came for my fusil." The lad smiled. "It is done." He pointed at a leather case on the front bar. "Pater is gone. He says it will be bad here. I'm to keep the doors locked and only eat food in the house." "Very wise." The man paused to admire the case, the fine steel buckles made by hand and blued, and expert leatherwork. Then he took out the weapon. "You made this?" he asked. The young man grinned. "I did too. Pater helped with the lock. I'm not that dab with springs yet. And I hired the leatherwork." The boy was so pleased with himself that the man almost laughed. He permitted himself a smile instead. "And the compartment?" "Just as you asked," the young man said. "Not in the weapon, neither." He showed his visitor the cunning compartment built for keeping a secret. "Superb," the man in the black cloak said, and slammed his dagger into the young man's temple, killing him instantly. The blade emerged from the other temple with admirable precision, and the man in the black cloak supported the corpse all the way to the floor, stepping away from the flow of blood. Then he filled the secret compartment with his deadly secret, wearing gloves. One tiny jewel skittered away across the table, and he tracked it down, picked it up with coal tongs from the fireplace, and put it in his belt purse. Then he threw his gloves, fine black gloves, in the fire, where they sparkled as if impregnated with gunpowder. He left, satisfied, leaving the shop door wide open to the looters already moving along the street like roaches. But then he paused. The decision was made. There was no point in being sloppy or sentimental now. He took the tiny jewel from his purse, using his handkerchief, covered his horse's head with his cloak, and tossed it back through the open door. It was so tiny, he didn't even hear it hit the floor. He led his horse away. Only after he counted 100 paces did he trigger the jewel's power. The house behind him seemed to swell for a moment. Then fire, white fire, blew from every window, the glass and horn panes exploding outwards, the shutters immolating, the doors blowing off their hinges. It sounded like a crack of thunder, followed by a rushing of wind, and then the fire began to catch the other old houses in the row, even as the first house collapsed inwards in a roar of sparks and a burst of thick black smoke. He mounted his mare, who didn't like the smell of blood on him, or the sound or smell of smoke, and he used some of his power to cast an occulter. It didn't make him invisible. It merely compelled most people to look elsewhere. He drew a second pair of gloves from his belt and tried not to acknowledge that he'd always intended this. The killing, the secret, the compartment.